Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. Mike Talbot at 12 noon on this Friday, 14th of December. And I'm talking to you from a chilly Derbyshire for our webinar this afternoon on preventing homelessness with mediation. Just a very quick word about me. I'm Dr. Mike Talbot. I started UK Mediation almost 20 years ago. Shocking though it seems. We are an organisation that does mediation for all sorts of areas of work, including workplace, commercial, interpersonal, working with boards of directors, working with charities and third sector, private sector, working in neighbourhoods and communities, and of particular relevance for today is working with organisations who are in the business of trying to prevent homelessness using mediation. So quickly to tell you, in the next 40 minutes or so I will be looking at the Homelessness Reduction Act. This is a significant piece of legislation that's come in this year to do with, as the name implies, how we can both prevent homelessness and also to better provide for people who do find themselves homeless. There's some provisions in that relate directly to the greater provision of mediation, and I'll be referencing some of that. And then talking about how conflict leads to homelessness. So some of the reasons for people becoming homeless, not all of them, are to do with family conflict, and we'll be talking about that. And where mediation comes in. So where can we use mediation to try and resolve that conflict so that people don't find themselves out of secure accommodation. We've been doing this kind of work for about 20 years, like I say, worked with a lot of organisations, and we've picked one to talk about today in terms of a case study of an organisation in the UK where we've done this work and where they are now using the mediation model to resolve conflict within families. We were talking about how that model works and why mediation achieves the results that it does, and then there'll be time for a Q&A at the end. So, first of all, in time-honoured tradition, just to set the scene a little bit, get some context, talk about some of the statistics around this subject area, around homelessness and the incidence of homelessness. So first of all, the first shocking figure is, around about 4 out of 10 young people who run away from home attribute that running away to poor relationships with parents. So people are trying to get young people trying to get away from a home where there is a poor relationship, where they're not getting on with mum, dad, carer, guardian, and they run away consequently. They may not become homeless, they may go back to home, or they may go and stay with relatives or take up some other provision, but initially running away from home, about 4 out of 10 would say it's because of falling out with parents. And a similar American statistic from 2008 is around family dynamics in general, who 90% of youth runaways say that this is a critical issue for them. So this is a significant factor contributing to the young person running away from home. Homeless Link in the UK say that around a third of people either have been or they know someone who has been homeless. So this is worth dwelling on, this figure. I think 1 in 3 of us has either been homeless or we know somebody who has been homeless. And certainly my own experience would fit with that. Quite a surprising figure, that one. And then the absolute figures, again in the UK from Homeless Link, would show that there's over 320,000 people who are considered homeless. So people who don't have secure accommodation, which they're going to be in for more than just temporarily. So figures from Homeless Link there showing that number of people are currently considered homeless. And the last one is about private tenancy loss, which is the most common cause of homelessness. So people who are in accommodation think they're doing okay, got some kind of a tenancy agreement, they lose that private tenancy and become homeless, and that's nearly 19,000 cases in 2016. They're the most recent figures from Shelter. So we haven't got the figures for 2017 yet, but losing your tenancy, becoming homeless, this is almost 19,000 cases in 2016. A lot. So let's have a think about this piece of legislation. So clearly there's a problem, and this legislation was passed in the House of Commons in the UK in 2017. It came into operation in April this year, the Homelessness Reduction Act. So the Act itself, it changes a few things about how we both try and prevent homelessness and how we provide relief to people who have become homelessness. So first of all, prevention, homeless, sorry. First of all, prevention. So the local housing authority needs to see that the person who's under threat of homelessness continues to have accommodation. And it applies to everybody who's threatened with homelessness within the next 56 days. So the idea is that if a person sees that they may become homeless within the next couple of months, they can approach the local housing authority with this imminent threat, and the local housing authority has a duty that that person continues to have accommodation, which should be more than just temporary. It should be accommodation that's likely to last more than 6 months. And this applies to everybody who's under threat of homelessness and they're likely to be out on the street within the next 56 days. That's double what it used to be. So this is one of the changes in the Act, is to try and anticipate further ahead somebody actually becoming homeless. And the duty on the local housing authority is to assess the person and provide a personalised housing plan. So more than a one-size-fits-all. The Act tries to encourage more person-centred planning with people, looking at individual needs, taking into account any additional needs, and making sure that the person at threat of homelessness has a personalised strategy for how to ensure that at the end of whatever the threat is, whether it's loss of tenancy or family conflict, at the end of that process, if they do become homeless, then there's some kind of a safety net there. They will continue to have accommodation. And the second part is about relief for people who have become homeless, and in the Act it says, quote, that the local housing authority should take reasonable steps to help the applicant to secure accommodation. Now this can include attempting mediation or conciliation, where somebody's threatened with being excluded from a home by parent or family. So this is the bit of particular relevance to us, of course, is ensuring that these processes are offered or are available to the applicant to ensure that, you know, if the conflict can be resolved, then it should. And this applies now to all eligible applicants who are now homeless. So this is when you've actually become homeless. And there's a slight change in the qualifying criteria in the Act as well. So there are more people who actually fall into the qualifying zone. There used to be quite a few exclusions previously. So there we are, that's the Act, new legislation. And so what are we saying about this? Well, it needs a thorough assessment, a personalised response, and it puts more emphasis on the prevention of homelessness, for example, by resolving conflict. And it's for all of those who are homeless and eligible, with very few exclusions. And there is an expectation on the applicant to cooperate with the housing authority if they want help. So if there is a lack of cooperation or any unreasonable refusal of a suitable offer of accommodation, then the person will cease to receive that help from the local housing authority. So there's an expectation that the applicant will cooperate and will, within reason, accept what's offered to them. Okay, so that's the Act, and part of what's in the Act there is about using mediation or conciliation to try and attempt to resolve the family conflict so that the young person's leaving of a family home is not due to unresolved conflict. So how does conflict lead to homelessness? Well, it's fair to say that you know, there's a lot of it about. Certainly in our work, a lot of conflict with young people and parents, carers, etc. We've got a little film clip that we'll show you now, just illustrating the kind of thing that can happen. So let's see this film clip with Sally and Molly, who have a bit of a falling out in the family home.
Well, did you sleep well? In college this morning?
Yeah.
What time are you going in?
9.
How are you getting on with that piece of portfolio evidence? Are you struggling with that a bit?
Fine.
What time are you back?
Normal time.
Aren't you eating breakfast with me?
No.
Molly, bring your bowl down when you finish with it. I'm sick of all that stuff being in your bedroom. Hello. Oh, yes, it is. It's Sally. Yeah, Sally King. Oh, hello. It's nice to talk to you. Molly's not been attending college. No, I had no idea. She's not attended for 3 weeks. She's been packing her bags and saying each morning, I'm going off to college. And she sort of, well, in amongst everything, she sort of vaguely said what she's been doing. Right. Yeah. I've noticed a change in her attitude. Yeah, definitely. She's been quite rude and difficult. She's. I've had a sense that she's not always telling the truth, and she's been a bit evasive. Yeah, she's blocked me on Facebook, so I have a sense that she was beginning to hide things. But you know, part of that I thought was just growing up a bit. Well. Yeah, I'll wait until she comes in later, and then I'll have a word with her. Okay, I'll ring you. Have you got a phone number? I can get you on the phone, the number you've just rung me on. Okay, so if I give you a ring back as soon as I've spoken to her, and we can decide what to do and what's been happening. Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I do really appreciate it. I'm really, really sorry. I wouldn't have been letting it happen if I'd have realised. Okay, all right, thank you. Bye-bye. Molly, where have you been? You've been missing for 2 days.
Been with friends.
I've rang all your friends.
Well, I've been with friends. Why does it
ones?
matter? Just friends.
I've been worried about you.
It's just with friends.
And college is just wrong.
Oh,
What's
fuck
going
off!
on?
Why
Molly,
does
this
it
conversation's
matter?
not over. What's going on with your attitude?
Nothing.
It's terrible at the moment. Ellie shouldn't have to hear that sort of language from your mouth. She's only next door. Don't look at me like that. What's going on with college?
Nothing.
The phone said you're not even coming to lectures. Your attitude's terrible. The room looks like a complete pigsty.
Oh, just leave
Where
me
are you
alone.
going?
I'm staying
Where
with
are you going?
friends.
Okay, so there's some scenes from a situation in which a young person falling out with mum and clearly not going to a good place, lack of understanding between the two of them, different perspectives, different understanding of boundaries, possibly some history there it would suggest in the film. So I'll mention a bit later on about how you can get to see more of that film and to get a sort of a deeper understanding of those kinds of situations and leading from that into mediation. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on, but there's a fairly typical situation. So what's going on? Well, there can be in families, I don't think there is in this case at all, but there can be conflict or abuse between the parents and carers, which causes a young person to want to leave the family home or causes them to be forcibly ejected from the family home, or the young person pushing boundaries that the parents and carers want to maintain. So this is a very common thing, especially in the situation we're seeing there, where Molly wants to assert her independence, to see people that she wants to see, to manage her own time, decide when she goes to college or not. You know, some stuff there about a new boyfriend and what have you that maybe mum doesn't approve of. Where she comes and goes into the house, the state of the bedroom, bringing crocs down from the bedroom, etc. So boundaries that the parents, carers want to maintain, and there's conflict there with the young person. And sometimes parents and carers who don't know what the young person's up to, and unfortunately and very sadly who don't care what the young person's up to. This can lead to a conflict situation and a lack of regard and consideration for the young person, which can inevitably lead to conflict. Or sometimes, very unfortunately, you know, the mental health or lifestyle of the parents and carers that impacts on the young person. So sometimes due to circumstances beyond their control, not always, but it impacts on the young person negatively and causes that young person to leave the home or to be required to leave the home. So these are the kind of things that can lead from you know, poor relationships, dysfunctional parent-child relationships in the home and lead to the young person actually becoming homeless. So where does mediation come in? Well, let's have a think about how mediation could work. Here's a mediation session. And again, this is something on the film that I'll mention a bit later on. But the idea is what we're doing in mediation is we're setting up an environment where the family members can come up with their own workable solutions between themselves without being told what to do for how the young person is either going to integrate better with the family home, or if it's the best thing for them to leave with dignity and to move to an alternative setting where they're safe and secure and supported. So it's not always best for the young person that they stay in the family home. And it's fair to say that some family homes are not particularly safe, secure or supportive places, or particularly loving places, and it might be better that the young person's not there. So to set up an arrangement where the parent knows where the young person is, where there's some kind of a support arrangement between the parent or carer and young person, and for them then to leave the family home might be the best thing for that young person. Moving to an alternative setting, so where they are safe, where the parent or carer knows where they are, where they have some contact with them, maybe some occasional meetups or even have some continuing involvement, but perhaps for that young person to be outside of that home. Or if they're going to stay there, to get some rules in place, some better understanding about what the expectations are both ways, some kind of a behavioural contract so that both the parents and carers and the young person don't continually come into conflict. So also in this part of the presentation, I'll just say about mediation being provided through agencies such as Night Stop, DePaul UK, excellent charity, St Basil's in Birmingham, young people's charity who've set up a mediation centre of their own, Bernardo's UK-wide, who work with families and young people. We've been training those for 15, 16 years. And local authorities, and I've got brackets here, family group conferencing, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a variant model of mediation, came from New Zealand in the first place, and it's about getting the whole family together to talk about the arrangements and the setup for if a young person is leaving the family home or at risk of becoming homeless, for the whole family to get together and figure out the best way to make sure that that young person's safe and secure and supported. And then some community mediation services, so free at the point of delivery community mediation services in a lot of towns throughout the UK who can help with the provision of mediation. I'll just pause there briefly. So I've got a question from Mary-Ann Barlow which says, how do you respond to people who say I'd love to use mediation to prevent homelessness but I can't afford it? So not sure what the context is there, Mary-Ann. Perhaps you could give us another one line. Let us know what sort of context you're talking about. Are you a provider or are you a mediator, or I wonder what sort of setting you're in. And on the screen now, all of those agencies will provide mediation free at the point of delivery. So if you're talking from the perspective of a service user, they would find mediation available through any of those agencies whose name is on the screen and more besides. But I can certainly point people in the right direction if they want to know where they could get mediation. It's often the case that the families who are drawing down these services, not always, but often the case, drawing down these services, they're probably not going to be able to afford commercial rates for mediation. So it's very important that they're getting it free at the point of delivery, and these would be some of the places where you could do that. Let's talk about the lovely people down in Croydon at Case. Though this is a youth support service. They work with and support young people who are either homeless or at risk of homelessness. Down in Croydon in the home counties in the UK. So we've been involved with Case for a little while and we still have ongoing involvement with them, and here's the happy day when they completed their training with us. The lovely people down there at Case back in May this year have trained on the level 4 accredited course with us, so that they are now proud holders of the Mediation Practitioner Certificate, and I was delighted to go down and deliver that course myself. And to stay involved with that organisation as they roll out their mediation service. So let's have a think about what they're doing down at Case, down in Croydon. So they had training back in May. We tailor the course to their exact requirements. Their particular setting is not just working with families, but also host families. So they place young people for short to long term with host families. So local families who are able to take in a young person for temporary accommodation. Also they have some residential settings where several young people would be in a building together, and that can bring conflict in itself, but also looking at working with families so that the young person doesn't become homeless in the first place. And this can be where things come to a head, where the young person is threatened with being chucked out because of lifestyle issues, because of behavioural problems to do with the parents' lifestyle or the parents' own personal predicaments, or often just ongoing conflict, the kind of thing that we get with teenagers and parents, which comes to a critical point where the young person is being required to leave. So we're tailoring the training to exactly those requirements. And what we do now is, now that these guys are actually going out and delivering mediation to their service users, and sometimes just delivering, just building the mediation skills into their regular role as well. So it's not all of the time that they're setting up structured mediation cases as such, but often just building the skills into what they do. And so now we can go back and discuss on a quarterly basis cases that they're working with, places where they're using their mediation skills. It helps to keep their professional practice on track and develop their skills further. And some of these guys are going to be going for the level 5 qualification as well, which is a further qualification when they've got some cases under their belts, where they can write up, do some critical evaluation of their mediation work, look at some reflective practice, thinking about ethics and the efficacy of the work that they're doing, and actually get a level 5 qualification as mediators as well. So we'd really encourage them to do that, and a lot of people who've trained with us over the years, we've trained about 5,000 mediators over the last 20 years. We're very interested in helping them with these progression routes and ongoing training and continuing professional development. So there's Keish, and we spoke to the lovely Usha from Keish, who had some things to say about the training that we provided. So they're ready to mediate in the family disputes. Used a lot of role plays that were very realistic, customised to what they did. Some nice comments about the trainer there, and they're saying they're building this model into how they structure all of these cases. And now we're doing supervision days with them, sharing anonymised details of mediation cases, good and bad. So I always tell people, you're not going to learn much by just bringing along your successes to supervision days. So come along and say what didn't work so well, what went wrong, cases that didn't turn out how you would have liked. You can learn so much from that casework as well. Sharing it with your colleagues, everybody can benefit from your experiences. It's a great way to develop your skills, great way to get better as a mediator. So thanks very much for those comments, Usha. And how does it work? Well, we're talking about this mediation thing. You got a bit of a glimpse of the kind of conflict that can lead to the need for mediation. So what actually happens within a mediation case? First thing is, this is voluntary and you can't be forced to take part. So it's really important that people are not frog marched into mediation because they just resist it if they are. So it's most important that people choose to take part, have that good faith and have that intention to try and make it work. If they don't try and make it work, it won't. And I say that from bitter experience. The point is, from the perspective of the mediator, they're impartial. So there's no blame or finger wagging. We're not making judgments about any aspect of people's parenting. We're not making judgments about any aspects of the young person's behaviour. And we're certainly not making judgments about what we think should happen. And I think this is a tricky thing with some agencies because they have an agenda and their funders might actually expect them to be requiring the family to not kick the young person out. And if the practitioner takes on that agenda and actually takes the side of an outcome that they think is the best thing that could happen, such as the young person not being kicked out of the home, you've lost your impartiality. So you lose your impartiality, and you take on an agenda, which means that you're actually taking sides, and that can make the process very difficult. So it's important that the mediation provider is impartial and doesn't take a view about what should happen. And to that end, it's keeping things confidential. So there are often things that the two sides have said or done that they don't want to get passed on any further. They may need to have a quite difficult conversation within the mediation. They need to speak freely. And people put their ideas across in very different ways, and how we work with, for example, a workplace mediation or a commercial mediation would be quite different than how we might work with a young person and his or her parent or carer. The ability to express oneself, the ability to put difficult ideas into words, the ability to refrain from swearing or critical comments or very persecutory language. We don't necessarily count on that. So people will be encouraged to express themselves just how they need to express themselves. And we keep things private, so people can say exactly what they like. And provided we don't have any concern for risk issues or anybody's coming to any harm, then the process will allow people to express themselves in just the way they wish, and to do that in private and to get to say what they like. So there's three of the boundaries around mediation. And then in terms of why mediation works, I mean, what does it do? Well, the point is that both sides get to hear just how their own words and behaviours have impacted on the other. And what we're trying to do is, firstly, to build some empathy between the practitioner and each of the two sides in a conflict. So we will have some private time first with each of the two parties, try and develop some empathy with each of the parties separately, and then when we get them together, we're trying to get that empathy between them so that they can get a chance to explain their motivations, say the unsayable in a safe and private environment so it doesn't get passed on anywhere else, and hopefully to build the collaboration and help and get them to make a future focused plan. So we're not talking about going over old resentments, having an argument about the ins and outs of how they got here, or what's gone wrong in the family, or that thing that you did 10 years ago. There may be some need to go over those different narratives around what has led them to the current situation, but more importantly, it's about looking at what are we going to do starting tomorrow differently. It would be about looking at a future focused plan and deciding what you're going to do from tomorrow. I just heard back from Mary Ann. Mary Ann, thank you for that. That answers your question. And you've said where you live and what agency you would speak to get some mediation free at the point of delivery. So thanks very much, Mary Ann, for coming back on that. So that's how it works. And then let's put some flesh on the bones about how you would make the most of mediation in this setting. What we would say is, if you're in a situation where you have a choice about this, offer mediation early on. Don't leave it until communication's broken down. It's probably too late then, you've missed the boat. So mediation needs to come in early on when people are still talking, when they are able to have a dialogue in an open and honest way and talk about what they think about the situation, how they feel about the situation. And even if it's angry dialogue, even if it's characterised with a lot of shouting and, we've got pretty broad shoulders as mediators, and people want to swear at each other, that's okay with us. So that's fine, early on where there is still that energetic dialogue, don't leave it until communication's broken down and people have got to that depressed point where they're not talking, where they've got their heads down, where it's very difficult to get people to express themselves. It has to be voluntary, it has to be seen to be voluntary, and people will really resist being made to do something against their will. And this is particularly true for parents and carers or young people who've been subject to a lot of intervention by multiple agencies. It sounds a bit of a funny idea, but they get sick of being helped. You become a professional helpee, somebody who's continually drawing down services of people who, maybe telling you what to do or making judgments about your situation. And we want to make mediation something different. It's voluntary. You're not going to be told what to do. We're not going to force you into anything, even not going to force you into participating. It's there. If you want it, you can use it. You need to make it work. The mediator can't make it work if you don't want it to. And the third thing about anybody in this area who's thinking of doing this work is you need to stay truly impartial. It can be tricky sometimes. It's very easy for us to form quick judgments about situations, decide who's right or wrong. Those of us who are parents, it's easy to sort of put yourself into a place where you're starting to identify with the predicament that you see the parent in, and to make judgments about what should or shouldn't be happening, and the rights or wrongs of how the young person's behaving. So, it's a really tricky thing to do, but people don't want you to judge, don't want you to take sides, they don't want to be told what to do. So the challenge for the mediator is to stay truly impartial. So as we are talking there all about the theory, let's take a little look at some of the elements of a mediation case. And let's see a bit of the film that I was mentioning earlier, and I'll talk through what's going on. Initial stage of contact with party one. So party one in this case would be the young person, Molly, and the mediator would meet privately with her, and then stage two would go and meet privately with the parent or carer and speak in confidence with the two of them. So a third stage would be the mediator just considering whether we've got a situation that could be taken forwards into a joint meeting, and then stage four is that joint meeting where we get the two sides together. There are some rules, and the mediator would lay out the rules by which the mediation will be run, and we get explicit agreement from the parties about that. Then we get to hear from them individually about what's going on, to lay out their stall and say what it is they want to get out of the process, and then the mediator gets the dialogue going between them. So We're looking at an agenda of items. In this case, we need to talk about what happens in the home, what happens with Dad, college, Steve as the new boyfriend, and Molly's behaviours, and then Mum's behaviours too. And then in 5, we have the dialogue, the negotiation, where we work off that agenda, get them to say whatever needs to be said about each of these 5 topics, and get them to come to some kind of a consensus or agreement about what they're going to do differently from tomorrow onwards. This might require that there's, some argument that needs to take place, and it's a healthy thing. And then in stage 6, we put all of that together into an agreement. The mediator writes it down in the parties' words, gives it to the 2 sides to sign and stick to as a behavioural contract. So it's a bit like an acceptable behaviour contract. It's a deal between the 2 about what they're going to do differently around all of the agenda items, with them having had a chance to speak privately to the mediator, and then to the mediator in front of each other, and then to each other. So they go away with this good faith agreement. It's not binding contract, but it's something they can work with. And then at stage 7, we follow up after about 6 weeks with both sides, check how things have gone, and check whether the mediation's been successful. What we don't want to do is have short-term agreements that don't last, and we want to make sure that these things do endure. So there's a very, very quick overview of the mediation process, and there's 7 stages that we use. So that's what mediation is, sort of where it comes into the Homelessness Reduction Act. So I've put up a slide there saying any questions. So you've seen how the model works. We've got a bit of an illustration of a typical conflict and a very quick overview of the mediation process in 7 stages. I'll be mentioning something else about that film just in a second. So whilst I'm doing this next bit, if there are any further questions, thanks very much for the comments and questions so far. Now would be a good time to raise those. The things that we could be doing for you is our training courses on homelessness prevention, in-house courses, customised to your own setting, very much like Keisha's had. We will be doing a public course. If you've just got 1 or 2 people you'd like to train and you want to send them along to a public course, come along to our course in June next year in Birmingham, which is it's a one-off course, this one, Families, Housing and Neighbourhood, doing our level 4 accredited qualification next June. And a little question that's come in by email, question is from Francesca, who says, who would you say is the best placed person to do the mediation with someone at risk, an internal or external mediator? Well, thanks for that, Francesca. I think internal mediators, actually, to give you a straight answer, I think if you are in touch with agencies as a young person, and there's somebody, a trusted individual within that organisation who is trained as a mediator, who can actually help to resolve the conflict between you and a parent. If you've got a relationship with them already, if you know that individual in the agency, if the practitioner within the agency is able to, has got premises, is able to have repeat visits with you, then I think that's a pretty good setup. And relating back to Marianne's question earlier on, saying about mediation, where you can get it for free. I think a lot of the agencies we're thinking about are funded either by National Lottery or from through local authorities. So really, in terms of do you do internal or external mediation, internal's better. And certainly for most of our applications, we have trained mediators within agencies who can provide that mediation to their own service users. Here's a question from South Bayable, who has a comment first of all. It says, it's difficult to motivate other parts of local authority, for example social services or criminal justice, to take on elements of mediation rather than encouraging the homeless route. Maybe a multi-agency approach to get everyone on board, says South Bayable. And the comment is, if a young person presents to a service, mediation should be available within that service, as it is difficult to build trust. Absolutely agree, which is kind of what I've just been saying. So, if you went to St Basil's or to Bernardo's or to Night Stop or to Caish or to the local housing authority, ideally the service should be available right there. Because once you've built that trust, and people who are in difficult predicaments, who are perhaps in quite insecure environments, and we know that there's a very high incidence of mental health problems, for example, amongst youngsters who do get made homeless. It's not easy to build trust, and once you have built that trust with a practitioner, with somebody who's helping you out within an agency, it would be ideal if either that person or one of their associates could provide that mediation from within that same agency, because you're right, it's hard to build trust. So I quite agree, it's a good thing to train people up within the agencies so that they can offer mediation as a range of services. And hi there, Hannah, from Crisis. Have we worked with, or do we know of agencies that work with adults to do mediation? So not a young person and carer, but 2 adults. Yes, we do, Hannah, and we will send you some information. So mediation between adults, yeah, for sure. Not the young person, not between the young person and their carer, but between 2 adults. Yes. So it's possible to provide that mediation with mum and dad, or the mum or dad and a partner, sometimes a new partner. The restructured family situation is a classic example, and where the incoming partner of the parents doesn't get on with the young person, or there are issues between the young person and the new partner. And in those cases, yeah, mediation is required between the 2 adults. So that's a really interesting one, Hannah. Thank you very much from Crisis. And again, the agencies that we're talking about, they could well provide this for themselves. So we'll send something to you straight after. Oh, Hannah, there we go. We've got oh goodness me, there's a conversation going on in front of me, and I can't narrate it quickly enough. So Hannah, if you email us at webinar@ukmediation.net, it's on the screen there, and we can follow this up with you after the webinar. And a couple of thank yous there from Hannah and South Bayable. So there we go. It's a great way to have a conversation. So here we are. So there's a public course coming up in June. We'll email details of all of this stuff to you. I don't like doing a salesy bit here. What I'd like to say is here's our free stuff. So here's a great free thing that's coming up. In April next year, I just hesitated because I'm thinking, is it this year or next year? No, we've still got 16 days of this year left. But next year, we're doing an online showcase. What that is, it's sections from the film that I'd mentioned earlier. You can see some stills from the film here on screen as I'm talking. So it's about the build-up of a conflict between a young person and her mum, in this case, about the fallout, about the involvement of a new boyfriend that mum doesn't approve of, how this leads to some issues between the 2 of them, then about Molly's non-attendance at college, and then some aspects of her lifestyle and her conduct within the house, some resentments that are around with regard to Molly's view of what happened in the breakup of the marriage, and Molly's relationship with her dad, and Mum's relationship with Molly's dad, and how this comes into mediation, and how the mediation progresses and leads to an agreement at the end. So this will be on Friday, 5th of April. We'll send you some information. So the whole thing will be about the same length as what we're doing today, which is about 40 minutes. And it will take you through all of the steps and stages in some detail. You'll be able to see some of the skills of mediation. It's me in the role of mediator, and you'll be able to see just how the whole thing hangs together in a bit more of a graphic way. We're talking mostly about the theory today, but you'll get to see some of the practice on our online showcase on Friday, 5th of April next year. And you can register, my colleagues just put up a link there, so you can register your place for the online showcase at the link that's just appeared in the chat box. Hopefully you've all got the chat box there. You've got the opportunity there to click straight through onto that link. Great question from South Bayable. Thank you very much. What does mediation look like when a young person is LGBT and the parent carer is struggling with this? Well, again, the impartiality is a really important aspect of this, South Bayable. So we treat parties exactly the same. If the parent's struggling with this and it's on the basis of values, that is where it gets tricky. So if it's the parents' belief set, if they have some faith-based values, for example, or some aspects of their own background which lead them to be intolerant of or find it difficult to take the fact that their child is LGBT, the mediation still progresses in exactly the same way, but the consideration here is that mediation will only change people's behaviours. Mediation will only change what people say and do. If somebody has, for example, a faith-based view about whether it's right or wrong to be LGBT, it's a very hard thing to think about changing that through mediation. But what we can do is to give the young person a chance to explain to the parent their own predicament, their own thoughts and feelings around their sexuality, and their thoughts and feelings around the parent's reaction to their sexuality. And this can sometimes lead the parent, possibly with a shrug, to say, well, okay, and to be more tolerant of, even if not to be completely accepting and unconditional about the young person's sexuality. They may change how they conduct themselves and how they talk to the young person about the sexuality. It doesn't mean we're going to change their minds. It does mean we can change their behaviours. And I think this is something, it's I suppose a slightly frustrating thing in mediation when we see attitudes or beliefs or faith-based systems that don't suit us as mediators. We have to really suspend our own prejudices about that, to behave impartially between the two, and to accept that with mediation, you know, we're not doing therapy, and we're not going to change people's mindsets or anything characterological. The best we can do is get them to change what they say and do. I hope that's helpful, South Babel. And a little question from Tom on email. Plenty of questions today. Thank you, Tom. How important is it to get an accredited qualification as a mediator, and would a shorter course, a 2-day course, offer you the skills I need? I think it's very valuable, Tom, to get a 2-day training and to build in the skills of mediation into what you do. I think the important thing about the accredited qualification is the credibility. And I think if agencies are drawing down funding, for example, from local authority, or looking at lottery funding or funding from other charities, it can be an important aspect of your credibility that you've got an accredited qualification. So I think it's about credibility. It's about saying, yes, we are accredited mediators. But in terms of the skills, I meet a lot of very skilled practitioners in the agencies that we work with. I've got a lot of admiration for the work that people do, and some fantastic skill sets and fantastic mindsets of those practitioners. And I think for some people, 2 days on mediation skills might be sufficient for you to be able to build those skills into your professional repertoire, and it's not necessarily you know, a requirement that you should get the accredited qualification. So I think it's about you know, whether you need the credibility of being an accredited mediator, or whether it's enough just to take on the skills of mediation and build them into what you normally do. And a quick one back from South Babel, very helpful, thank you. Well, thank you, South Babel, for your question and for your gratitude as well. So we have a link come up about 2-day mediation skills. My colleague's quick off the mark today. So there's a little course there that you can click through to find out about a 2-day course on mediation skills for this area as well. Right, I said it'd be 40 minutes plus Q&A, so I'm not too far off. More free stuff. So again, I don't like to do sales on this, so no salesy stuff. Just to say, here's some free stuff coming up. We got one on mediating customer complaints. That feels like a million miles from what we've been talking about just in these last 40 minutes, but that's the first one of the year, next year. And then anybody who's thinking about becoming a workplace mediator, another free webinar on that in February. And then March time, we have some stuff on multinational organisations. It's an increasing part of our work, working with EU institutions and people in other countries. So we'll have a few things to say about multinational organisations in the webinar in March. So that's me done. I'm talking fast because I'm made a commitment to try and get it over in about 40 odd minutes. Do keep in touch. Please like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. You're welcome to follow us on Twitter. That's our handle on there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Dr. Mike Talbot. Or do have a look at our Facebook page as well. And if you see anything on there that you'd like to contribute to, that would be most welcome. That is us for today. I hope that's been interesting. Thank you very much for your attention and for your questions. Lots of you signed up today. Do keep in touch with us. Keep an eye out for all these free events that we're offering. And it'd be good for you to connect with us on social media as well. And all that leaves me to say is thanks very much for joining us today. We hope to see you again. Have a good weekend. Have a nice holiday. Happy New Year. And all the best.